We're going to talk about our question, which is how can I create an equation, a table, or a graph from a word problem? So, to start off, we're going to talk about word problems to equations. The first step is you want to identify your movement. All right, so you want to identify your movement. All right, and we're going to represent that with M. All right, so you want to identify your movement. We're going to represent that with M. And some keywords to figure out what your movement is are each, every, and also per. When you see one of those three words, you're off to a good start when you're trying to figure out what your movement is. Step two, you're going to identify your beginning point. Let me use a different color. So you identify your beginning point. And we're going to use the letter B to represent that. And then to figure out what your beginning point is, a good question to ask is what's being added or subtracted? All right, so to figure out what your B is, you want to look at what's being added or what's being subtracted. And then step three, you're going to plug in M and B into Y is equal to MX plus B. So that's the equation you're going to use to figure out how to convert a word problem to an equation. All right, so now we have an example below. It says Fred's family already has one dog. They adopted two more dogs. They adopt two more dogs every year. Oh my gosh, that's way too many dogs. I know their house smells. I know that couch smells. I know everything smells. But they adopt two more dogs every year. Create an equation, table, and graph that shows the relationship between the number of years past X and the total number of dogs Y in Fred's family. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to identify the movement. We're going to identify M. And like our step said, one way to figure out what M is, we're going to try to see if we can identify one of those keywords. So each, every, or per. So I'm looking around and I'm looking at this scenario and I do see the word every. All right, I'm going to backtrack to the start of that sentence. It says they adopt two more dogs every year. So now I know that 2 is going to represent my M because that was the closest value to M. All right, so that was the closest value to the word every. So I know 2 is going to represent my M. The next thing is I'm going to identify what my B is, all right, the beginning point. So to figure out what the beginning point is, you want to think about what's being added or subtracted. So that's like your starting point. All right, I'm going to go back to the beginning of the scenario. It says Fred's family already has one dog. All right, so they already had one dog. Since they already had one dog, they're not starting off with 0 dogs. In this scenario, they did not start off with 0 dogs. They already start off with 1. So our beginning point is going to be 1. All right, and now step 3 says we're going to plug in M and we're going to plug in B into the equation y is equal to mx plus b. So our equation is y is equal to mx plus b, and we're just going to plug in what that m value was and what that b value was. So we're going to keep the y, we're going to keep the x, and we're going to keep the plus sign unless it ends up being a negative value. And we're just going to plug in what the m was, which was 2, and plug in what b was, which was 1. So our equation here is y is equal to 2x plus 1. All right, so moving on to equations to tables. So when we're trying to convert an equation to a table, it's a two-step process. Step 1 is we're going to create x values on the table. So typically we start off with our regular counting numbers. So we'll start off with 1, 2, 3, 4, sometimes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. All right, if making a graph, look at the numbers on the x-axis. Step 2, we're going to plug in the x values into your equation to find the y values. All right. So we have a nice little table here below. We have our x column and we have our y column. But in this middle column, what we're going to do is we're going to write down our equation, which was 2x plus 1. All right. So for our x section, we're just going to put down our counting numbers. All right. So I'm going to put 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that's going to be considered our input. So our x is our input. Our y values is going to be our output. So whatever we get after we plug in x, the value for x is what we're going to end up with as our output, which is y. So here for this middle column, I'm just going to put 2 plus 1 for all of these. So 2 plus 1. All right. And then in place of x, I'm going to put what the value is on that row. So over here it's 0. Over here it's 1. Here it's 2. Here it's 3. And over here it's 4. And then I'm going to add in my equal sign. And I'm going to solve each one. So over here we have we have 2 times 0, which is 0, plus 1 is equal to 1. So that y value is going to be 1. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. So that's going to equal 3. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. So now we know what our x value is and we know what our y values are. So that's all there was to it when we're converting equation into a table. All right, now our last one, we're going to convert a table to a graph. So when we're converting a table to a graph, it's also a two-step process. We're going to use the x and the y values from the table to create ordered pairs. Create some ordered pairs. Step 2, we're going to plot the ordered pairs on the graph. So that's going to be the points. Oh, and then also the points should always make straight lines. All right, so when we're talking about a linear equation, they're always going to make straight lines. All right, so if they don't make a straight line, you know you did something wrong here. All right, so when we're converting a table to a graph, it's pretty simple. That's all we're going to do here. We're going to go ahead and take the values from each x and each y. So that's all we're going to do here. So that's called an ordered pair. We're going to take an x value and its matching y value. So for the first one, when x is at 0, y was at 1. So we're going to have 0 and 1 together. When x was at 1 over here, y was at 3. When x was at 2, y was at 5. All right, so I'm just going to take a couple of them. I'm going to start off with, and again, so the side that's going left and right, all right, the axis that's going left to right, that is your x-axis, and then the axis that's going up and down is your y-axis. I'm going to start off at 0 because x was at 0, and then I'm going to go up 1. Let me scoot in a little bit. Oh, so about right here. All right, so that represents 0 and 1. Then when x was at 1, y was at 3. So I'm going to come up about halfway here. All right, and then when X was at 2, Y was at 5. So that's going to be about right here. And now I could draw a line. And that's going to represent my graph. And I could have kept putting more and more points if I wanted to, but I just went ahead and stuck with 3. So that's all there is to it when we're converting word problems to equations, equations to tables, and tables to graphs. So we're going to do a couple practice problems next. All right, so here are the practice problems. What I'd recommend is pausing this video first, go through these couple practice problems, and then start it, and you'll be able to see me work these out. So go ahead and pause it, try to attempt a couple of these practice problems, and then press play whenever you're ready to see how you did. All right, here we go. Number 1. Franny orders 2 DVDs per month from her